Okay. Can you hear me? Oh, now's my chance. We're just waiting 5 more minutes because all the people that were religious and went to church are eating out there. But they're almost done. I told them they had 5 minutes. I'd like to thank my technical assistant, Scott, for being so helpful. I don't know if you can see that from back there. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Okay. Is everybody almost done? Okay. I'm starting. Yeah. Uh, this way. I don't think you want to go in there. Uh-huh. Yeah, I think so. Okay, I'm starting. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming to hear about this adventure. And I appreciate your interest because I think that we all have journeys that we go on. This just happens to be one that might have been a little longer than most people are able to take. And I have so much gratitude for having been able to do it that I wanted to share my journey. And I appreciate your interest. I want to thank, again, my technical assistant, Scott Kellerman, for knocking down the map, but also for setting up the slides. And okay, I think I can turn it up. Is that better? All right, I'll just yell. How's that? Okay. I want to thank you all for coming and also to thank Scott Kellerman for being my technical assistant. He spent several hours with me trying to get this PowerPoint. I have about 1,000 slides, and you won't have to see them all today, but we narrowed it down, but he was very patient and helped and brought his projector. He will be giving a talk soon at the United Nations about tropical diseases or something. Epidemics, and so he has a lot of experience, and I appreciate his input. All right, so I wanted to focus on lessons learned on the Camino. This could be a travel log of the journey and where we went and what happened in each little place, but I think really the most important thing about any journey is reflecting on it when you come back, and so that's what I'm trying to present as some of the things that I feel that I took away from the Camino. And I would also like to say that there are other people here who have walked the Camino. Maybe you could stand up if you've been on it. Yes. So it's not just me, and I hope that they'll help at the end. It's not going to be a really long talk, and they can maybe share some of their experiences. All right, now if I can figure out. So one of my favorite poets is Mary Oliver. She has a very short poem, Pay Attention, Be Amazed, and then Tell About It. So I did try to pay attention on the journey. We only got lost a few times, and it was amazing. There was something every day that was just such a gift. And of course, now I'm telling you about it. There is a film on Mary Oliver that's going to be shown at the Onyx soon, by the way, if you're a fan of hers, so that should be fun. Okay, so these are some of the lessons. There are many other lessons, but basically what I'm going to go over, relationships, talking a little bit about the natural world and some of the beauty that we saw, how the journey relates to faith, suffering, especially with feet, compassion, acceptance, and a little more about feet, and then back to relationships. Whoop, backwards. So the reason that I went on this trip is because of my sisters. We grew up the street, and my brother did not come. He's a twin with the middle sister there. The middle sister is Jane. Jane's the organizer. She has wanted to do this for a long time, and she turned 73 days ago. Today's my mom's birthday, actually. And Jane was planning this trip, and she is a planner, fortunately. And she kept working on us, and so my middle sister, Pam, came, and I went. And she was the impetus for it. And we had some interesting adventures as sisters. Where we started was Saint Jean de Pied or de Port. It's got several names, and that is on the right-hand side of the map at the top. That's in France. The journey was 490 miles. Probably we were well over 500 by the time we took some deviations. And we walked for 34 days or biked, or in one case of the one sister, took a bus, part of it. Somebody forgot to turn off their phone. That was me. So the symbol of the Camino is the scallop shell. And the first thing that happened was I got a package in the mail from my sister Jane with not one but 2 scallop shells, because that was the symbol. And she told me exactly what to do with it. It had a hole drilled in it, and I was to put it on my backpack, which I did, and I left another one with Tina here at Trinity. And I started with 3 names on my scallop shell. And you can see on my backpack at the end, I probably ended up with 20 names, because as we went, I would add the names of people who needed prayer and thought, and everyone had a story. And the reason that the scallop shell is the symbol, there's many different stories, but it's basically boils down to the fact that on the west coast of Spain, which is where St. James probably landed in a boat, and people then are pilgrims to end up at that area. There are a lot of these shells, so people would bring back the shells with them when they returned. Now, it also is kind of symbolic that, and this was explained to us in one of the churches where a woman gave us a tour, that the map of Spain, when you look at all these different routes for the Camino, kind of looks like a scallop shell. So that's another reason for it. I have to see which button to push. And everywhere along the way that you tell where you're going is they have these signs. That yellow splayed is the symbolic scallop shell, and then there's the yellow arrow. And sometimes a shell will be embedded in the concrete. Sometimes you just see a little teeny yellow line that goes this way, and so you follow that. Sometimes that really wasn't the yellow line that was official, so you end up someplace else. And we did not have GPS. There are a lot of people that tracked everything very meticulously. We just wandered. But all who wander are not lost. That's another saying I use a lot. So in one of the little churches in a town called Ledejos, we were grabbed by a woman who said we had to take a tour, and she showed us all through the church. And basically, this is St. James, one of Christ's apostles. He's the guy that did this pilgrimage. And when you look at the history of the Camino, where we were walking, starting in France, going south and then west, that land really has been walked by people for 1 million years. One of the places that we went through called Atapuerca, their human remains were found there from 1 million years ago, and the layers of history are complex. And I don't think anyone really knows the whole story of St. James and how he ended up there, but the woman in the church was quite sure that he came in a boat from Jerusalem, because after Christ died, so this was in about 40 years or so after Christ died, the apostles each had areas where they were supposed to go. Our priest Brad may know more about this. And St. James decided to go to his area in Galicia, which is the northwestern part of Spain, to start a church there. And I guess it was a little more difficult than he thought, because the people weren't necessarily easy to convert to Christianity, but he did try to start the church, and then eventually he ended up back in Jerusalem. Whether he walked to Jerusalem or sailed, it depends on what you read. But when he got there, unfortunately, Herod decapitated him. Herod was not a good guy, and so his disciples brought him back on a miraculous journey from Jerusalem back to the coast of Spain, and there he and his 2 disciples were buried. So this, in the church, where the lady gave us the tour, she pointed out specifically, here is St. James carrying his head in the boat as they sailed across the Mediterranean. So part of it is plausible and part of it is probably myth over the years. But that's how this pilgrimage to that area started. And I guess they were buried and were there for a long time, kind of forgotten about. And then in about the year 800, there was a guy named Paleo who was out in the woods, and he saw some lights, or he saw a star, depending on what you read, and he was led to this tomb or casket, and there were 3 remains in there, and he told his bishop, who told the king of that area at the time, and he said, we have to build a church there. So they built a church, and that is the beginning of the Church of Santiago, which is another name for James de Compostela. Compostela may have to do with stella, stars, campo, field, or it may have to do with something different. But anyway, that's how the whole thing started, and that church was ransacked a few times, and the bones were kind of lost for a while. But eventually, the cathedral, which is there now, which is magnificent, was built, and there's a big silver casket downstairs with the remains, and that church has been there since about the 1200s. That's where we ended up. So that's a brief history of why it's so confusing to know really what the pilgrimage, how it started. But what happens now is people come from all over. There are pilgrimages all over Europe that end up in that particular spot. And here's another example. It wasn't until actually when Franco came to power and that he revived the whole idea of the pilgrimage. He thought it would be good for tourism. And then in 1987, I think, there was a gentleman who started painting the arrows. And then the whole resurgence, which we are part of going on this. The reason we know about this is because of this whole resurgence of people walking the Camino. Now, people come for all different reasons. Only 20% of the people living in Spain are now practicing Catholics. So we met people coming for spiritual reasons, but many people come for their own personal quest. You saw the movie The Way, probably. Everybody has a story. All right, so relationships. These are my sisters. I'm the old one. She's the little one. She has a twin brother, Chuck, who lives up the hill. And that's the middle one, very much the middle one. So she's the planner. Pam is a doer and also needs attention. And then I'm the one who's the bossy one. So we had to work out our relationships because I don't know when you've last spent 41 days with the same people 24 hours a day. Even if you're married, you don't do that. So we had to work out some things. So you're supposed to give up something when you go on the Camino. So I decided I was going to give up being the bossy big sister because I get accused of that all the time. So I went with my clean slate, and then we had to take the train from Paris to Roncesvalles, which is where you start. And we stayed overnight in Paris, and we flew, then we had to be at the train. Jane, the organizer, had the tickets. We get on car number 6, and we had our seats. 16, car number 16. So we get down the platform, and she gets on car 6. And I said, Jane, we're supposed to get on car 16. Well, the numbers are going down, not up, so we'll just get on, and we'll figure it out. So I said, I am giving up. I am not going to be the bossy big sister. So we got on the wrong train, and we only had a few minutes, And I brought a little suitcase. She brought a middle-sized one because our luggage was transported from place to place. She bought a really big suitcase, and it was really heavy, but we all got on that car number 6 instead of 16. Then the people were shouting us in French, you're on the wrong train. No, 2 trains. So we realized there were 2 trains lined up in succession. So I grabbed my suitcase, Jane grabs her suitcase, we run down the platform to car number 16, and I turn around and there's no third sister. She's nowhere to be seen, and the train's about to leave, and I'm trying to speak French to the guy saying, mon fille. I thought that meant sister. It means my dog or something, not a sister. And he got that I was excited because I was thinking, okay, perhaps I will just stay and we'll come the next day, but all our reservations were in order. Anyway, then we see my sister kind of hobbling with her big suitcase, and she had actually fallen down the stairs in the train, and she had maybe even cracked her ribs. She was hurting. So the guy was shouting in French, and the woman at the other end pushed her on our train in a different car. And so then we all made it. We told the woman who was sitting in the 4th seat with us that our sister is coming. She will be mad. And so Pam comes down, and she looks at us, and she says, thanks a lot. So in terms of relationships, that was how we started. But I decided maybe I would assert myself a little more in the future and be bossy if it called for it. So we worked it all out. These are 2 people we met on the way. They are both named Sarah. This was a very special relationship that we forged. This one is actually a priest, and this one is a nurse practitioner midwife, and they'll appear later, but they were really our saviors, and we became very close, and that's my middle sister, Jane. Oh, dear, you did this. Okay, hang on. How do I stop it? Scott, how do Okay, so that, while we were, this has to do with the relationship with our friend here, our doctor friend, who on WhatsApp, he let us know he was in rehab because he had fractured his fibula. So we decided to send him a message, so we recorded that. And I didn't know that Scott put that in there. So my technical assistant does it again. All right. Another word about relationships. In the evenings, you usually had a pilgrim's meal, which they would give you a voucher for, or sometimes you ate at a big communal table. And so this was one night in Osobrero. We were at this table. We got placed with this gentleman and his daughter, Grace and Brandon. They're from Nashville, and we got to talking with them, and they hiked the whole thing together. The mom met them at the end. And it turns out he grew up in California in a little town. And we said, where is that? And he said, Exeter. And my sister said, oh, my son lives in Exeter. Her son lives in Exeter. And we kept talking, and her grandson had graduated that very day from 8th grade from this little tiny school in Exeter. Brandon graduated from the same school about 50 years before, same little school. And that happened more than once. I know we've all had experiences like that traveling, but we had a lot in common, and we intersected with them. This is just an example of what you might see on the way: a parent walking with a child, 2 siblings walking well, actually, we didn't see that many siblings. They all said, you're going all the way with your siblings? So they, I think, knew about that. This was a husband and wife that we would run into sometimes in the evening. She would draw the picture of something they had seen that day, and watercolor it, and then he had beautiful penmanship, and he wrote the story. So they ended up with these beautiful books of their journeys. And they did this wherever they went in the world. All right, and then where we were walking, it was very varied landscape. The first day, I guess it was only a 3,000-foot climb. I thought it was 4,500, but it might have been 4,500. We went over the Pyrenees and down into this gorgeous green area, sheep and all kinds of things. And that was a very different landscape. And then basically you go through all these various towns that are small, and then you get to what's called the meseta in the middle. It's a big flat area, but it's not one. It's kind of in the middle of the map there. It's not one big flat mesa. It's you go up, and then there's a flat spot. Then you go down, and then you go up, and you go down. You do that for 3 or 4 days in a row, and so the landscape varied, but there was always something every day. We saw a lot of poppies. We came down one hill and turned, and there was this field of poppies, and you can't even imagine the color. It was so incredible. You thought you were in a different area. A lot of forests. Unfortunately, some of those are burning now. It was hot many days, but not as hot as it is now. This is in the Pyrenees going over. These are roses. Sometimes you'd be enclosed in a little path, and sometimes it just felt like you were on the moon. It was so open and wide. A lot of grain, wheat fields, and so forth. My sister, the planner, Jane, loves storks, and just about every town in the church there would be storks. I think she probably has at least 500 stork pictures. So we would get to town, and she'd go off looking for the storks. So they were often nested on the tops of the trees, and they often had babies. So she would just sit and watch storks while we were having a beer or something. So, and again, lots of wildflowers. This was a red-footed partridge. I have the app called Merlin, which you have on your phone, and there were so many different birds in some of the areas with the creeks and the forests, and almost every day, cuckoos. Cuckoo, cuckoo. And they sound just like Cheryl's living room. She has a lot of cuckoos, but it was so delightful. You'd hear them wherever you went, and I never saw one. They're, I guess, small and brown. The other thing that we really noticed is no trash, especially on the first half. There's a lot of graffiti on the buildings when you get to the bigger cities, but they didn't use plastic bags, they didn't use paper, or things that wouldn't break down, and lots of natural materials. So this is a slate roof, an arrow in the path that people, I don't know how long it took people to make these big arrows out of stones, but every place you went, you were in the natural world. It didn't feel artificial in any way. If you went to get a Zumo, which was an orange juice, fresh squeezed orange juice, the machine that makes it is called a Zumo, and so you don't say you want an orange juice, you say you want a Zumo, but you always got a glass. You didn't get a paper cup at the beginning, and you really can do it that way if you decide to. Lots of different fountains. This is an old water system that they had with the water coming in and then distributed. It reminded me of, we've been on the island of Madeira, and they have something called the lavadas, and the water gets distributed in these stone or concrete things. I love the fountains because I could get my hair wet. And these were some of the places we stayed. This was an old mill that they had turned into a hotel. We were booked into a little hotel or some kind of something like that. Our accommodations varied. I know Kathy stayed in albergues. So albergues are the big communal places. They might have 10 beds, they might have 100 beds, and you just show up and you can get a room there that night. You can book them ahead of time. So there's all different kinds of lodging. But that particular one was really gorgeous. The water was coming underneath it. There were cows grazing outside. And it was very welcome after the long day. And this is another place called Ocebrero. This is just looking out my window. At this, I thought, oh, the sun's probably going down. And I looked out there, and that's what I saw. It was stupendous. Okay, a little about faith. Of course, this pilgrimage is really being made initially by Christians in the going the way of St. James, the Camino de Santiago. And so there are churches everywhere. Every town has a church, lots of different churches. This church happens to be 800 years old, although it does have some modern furniture here. A Naga hide couch was placed there. But so you could just come upon these churches, and they varied from a little, just, one room, simple place to huge cathedrals. My favorites were the small ones. A lot of the smaller ones have volunteers who sit there and they'll stamp your passport. I'll pass around my passport in a minute, and I know Katie brought her passport. So everywhere you go, you can get a stamp, and you have to show that at the end to get your certificate. But these people would come and volunteer, but a lot of the churches were closed because they said they don't have volunteers anymore. And so we couldn't go in some of the smaller churches. But just some examples, a lot of windmills. They use a lot of wind power there. But you come into a town, and this would be a typical vision that you'd see. You always see the church first. Lots of crosses everywhere. This whole fence, people had just taken sticks as they went by and made crosses, and we saw several fences like that. Running shoe crosses, people would hang things. There are many, many tributes along the way to people who had died. Loved ones, I think, would hike out and make a memorial to their loved one. There was one particular one that I was waiting for my sister to come down the hill, and it was a child, 2-year-old, and the family had come out, and it was just way off in the side. You could barely see it, and I went over, and it told the story of this little child, and they had made that a place where they can visit. You'd walk into a town. This was just down a little side street. I was hiking, looking over, and there was this altar. I'm not sure the significance, but it was all fresh roses. It was beautiful. So a lot of manifestations of people's faith. And this we saw in several towns. This is the festival of Corpus Christi. And what they do, we saw, kids and grandparents and everybody, they draw big things in chalk on the ground, and then they have colored sawdust, and it's kind of like a mandala, and they make these huge designs. This is the sawdust, and they're beautiful. I don't know how long they leave them there before they sweep them up, but it was just like watching an art show being built in the street. So we were able to see that. This is the cathedral at Burgos. Burgos is one of the larger towns. This cathedral is amazing. I think it took them 200 years to build. You could spend 2 weeks just looking in there. But I wanted to show this particularly for Cheryl because this is a nativity scene. That is a whole room. So if you can find the baby Jesus in there, good luck. He is up here, I think. And so I have a close-up of the baby Jesus. He's right, there he is. But and this is the woman selling lemonade if you visited the baby Jesus when he was born. But it was a very amazing thing. So every day had something like that. This is the cross where you leave something. And if you saw the movie The Way, this is the cross where he took his son's ashes. And so there's a lot of things that people give up there. I brought that little tiny shell, it was about that big, and that's what I put there. It looks very isolated. There's a whole tour bus parking lot on the other side of it. I don't want to spoil it for you, but it is kind of popular. And you can drive to it, and you can bring your offering there. This was an interesting church. It was a small one. This was the volunteer who was there with his stamp. And these are candles, but they're body parts. So there's an arm, a chest, woman, hand, and they sold these candles. So you could buy an arm candle or a leg candle. And I didn't ever figure that out because we didn't have a lot of time. I would go in and say some prayers and then leave. But it was kind of unusual. I was going to bring some home, but it was so hot it would have melted. I couldn't fit it in my backpack. And many of the churches in the evenings had what they called a pilgrim's mass, where people who were on the Camino could go and they had a little church service. But you also did a lot of sharing. And the first one, I only went to a couple, but the first one, there was a woman there who was her brother had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she was obviously very close to her brother. And she just cried the whole time. And all these people who never had met her just came around her and comforted her. And so his name, Leonardo, it's on my scallop shell. And she just kind of, that these serve a purpose because people go there to connect. So that's one way to do it, is the Pilgrim's Mass. Okay, there he is, St. James. That's his statue when you get to the final cathedral. And you can go, there's a little stair up behind him, and I think you can touch him or put your hands on his shoulders. But we just kind of went through. But if you go down under the altar, that's where this beautiful silver caskety thing is with his bones presumably in there. So you can see how elaborate that is as compared to the ones with the waxed arms. Okay, a little bit about suffering. As I listened to books on tape while I was walking, because you didn't always walk with the same people. You connected, but a lot of it I really enjoyed just going, at my own pace. And so I was listening to this book called The Case for Christ, and it was written, a gal who I delivered a pie to before I left said, "Oh, you should listen to this while you're on it." So it's actually a Washington Times reporter whose wife converted to Christianity, and then he started investigating, was Christ really alive? It's an interesting read. But he really goes into detail in there about what happens when you get crucified. And it was pretty graphic. And so you think a lot about your body. Something breaks down every day. At least for me, it did. It was mostly my feet. And by the time you're done, there isn't a person, I think, that hasn't gone through some kind of physical suffering. And here we are, putting our blister patches on. Very important things. This was my bed every morning. This is all the stuff that I used to put on my feet. And that's my feet before they really went bad. And so if you go to a lecture of Scott Kellerman during lunch at the medical staff room at the hospital, he usually has gross pictures of worms. So this is my foot in honor of Scott. That turned into a big ulcer. My whole foot swelled up. And I ended up riding a bike for 2 days. But one of those Sarahs, the midwife one that you saw, they were in the same town the night that I couldn't walk anymore in my foot. And she carried in her little suitcase a basin that collapsed, Epsom salts, a special little tincture that you put on wounds, and she did basically surgery on my foot to clean out all the dead stuff. It was just great. And I rode that bike for 2 days, and I was back on my feet, and I finished the last, I think it was 150 miles more. And they just happened to be there at that time. My sister didn't fare so well. She had done a marathon like 3 or 4 months before, and she one day just started getting really bad pain in her leg. That night she couldn't even get up. She had to use her sticks to get around her hotel room, and we thought she tore her meniscus. this other woman from Australia New Zealand had the same problem. Anyway, it turned out after we got home, she had a crack all the way across her tibia. She had a stress fracture of her tibia. So she had, I think, 10 days she didn't walk, or 7, but she walked the last 10 miles just because she wanted to do it, and probably messed up her leg more. Now she's been on, non-weight bearing for 6 weeks now, but she made it. My sisters are my heroes. And my sister Jane kind of fell and did something to her finger, and then her toenail's going to come off. I've already lost 2 toenails. I'm going to lose a couple more. But that's part of it, is just realizing your body is vulnerable, and you come to the person's aid. And those Sarahs really helped us. And that has to do with compassion. This is when my sister first started having trouble. These people were from New York. They were really funny. But this gal was a physical therapist, and we were stopped because Pam was having a hard time. And they showed up and they said, okay, what's going on? Well, she had tape, and she worked on her for an hour, stretching, massaging. It was in the park. So people were coming with their animals, sitting down and watching her. It kind of reminded me of some of our medical missions. And they taped her up, and she was able to go longer that day. This is a young man from Japan that I ran into in one of the cathedrals, and he was obviously a student, so I just prepaid for him to go in. We ran into him later, and he's got this backpack, and the zipper broke, and he's got all his stuff there, and so I said, oh, do you need any help? He goes, oh, I fix. I said, well, just in case. He goes, no, I fix. So I gave him a roll of green tape, which I always carry. Later we saw him, and that was his backpack, taped the whole thing together. And then he got a new backpack. The next time we saw him, he had a different backpack. And Jane, okay, so compassion. My sister Jane she's the planner, so she had 3 pairs of shoes, including a pair of sandals, which she always had on her backpack. And we ran into a guy, 20-something-year-old guy, who had the worst blisters. And she talked him into he took her sandals for the rest of the trip. And we heard about him later. Somebody said, oh, we saw that guy, and he told us about this old lady that gave him her sandals. Anyway, so she gave up her sandals. And this is the Sarah midwife. This is when Pam really was having a hard time. Her partner, Sarah, previous partner, wife, something, was an orthopedic nurse practitioner. They arranged a phone consult on the computer with that orthopedic nurse practitioner, and she went through the exam. She's kind of showing her how to do things, and she was very helpful. I mean, she really got Pam to stop walking because she was still trying to go, and we didn't know she had a fracture, but that was so they went to all that work to arrange that consult and everything. Okay, just to mention about food, which I call nurturing, but really it's about food. So the food was great. We didn't lose any weight. We ate a lot. And this is just an example of the bread being delivered, bread hanging on the door. And when you came to your lodging, they would give you a little formal tag, usually, that allowed you, if they didn't serve the dinner or the breakfast there, it allowed you to go where you were going to eat. So this is an example of one. The lady just takes a sticky note, stamps it, and it says, 3 cenas, 3 dinners, 3 breakfasts. Don't lose this, she says. Okay. So we took it to the place. Some of it was formal and some of it was informal. And these are 2 examples of donativos. Donativos are places you come upon when you're walking where some person has just put out food for free, and you can have whatever you want. If you want to make a donation, you can, and if not, not. These were people who have moved there from Portugal. They had a beautiful home, beautiful kitchen. They opened up the whole thing, and all you had to do was wash your dishes before we left. They had a piano, our friend who we met from Holland sat down and played a whole Bach concerto while we were eating this amazing fresh bread, fruit. This is another example, way, way out. The dog's guarding the food. And she had all kinds of different food there. And it's very uplifting to come across something like that. I like the vending machines. This is an olive vending machine. You can get all these different kinds of olives in cans. And my favorite are the anchovies, which are anchovies with the olives. So you just put in your euros and out comes olives. And this is another one with snacks and paella. So if you don't have time to make your paella for dinner, you just go get it out of the vending machine, put it in the microwave. And this is the real paella. This is the real deal. We ate a lot of that. It was great. This reminds me of Tony, my husband, except for more hair. But he would have been drinking wine in these areas. And this, a lot of the buildings, they would have these beautiful murals. And this was one of the murals. And it's just, it's what you feel like, you know, when you're enjoying the food. This is my lunch. I want to point out this is very nutritious. This is just one day when I was hiking by myself. So it's the anchovies with olives, which gives you fiber and protein. Coke, which makes you wake up because it's the afternoon, and fluids, and increases your blood sugar, except for the corn syrup. And a banana, which has potassium. So that, to me, was like perfect. And this is called an osero, I think, orero. These were where they would store their food up away from animals. And you see these all over the place, and some people are still using them. They'll put their produce and things in there. I don't know how you get into it, because there's really not like a door that you can see. But they're beautifully built, and you'll see them in back of many, many of the houses. And water, so basically there are springs along the way and fountains. And if it says no potable, then it means you don't drink it. Like this says agua no potable, don't drink that water. But everything else, you just put your water bottle under and you can drink. Toward the end, there were much less fountains, but the water is safe to drink. Isn't that an unusual concept? Okay, and then this guy we came upon as we were hiking down a hill. He was in a park, and he's done the Camino several times. I think he was from England. He tried to volunteer at some of the albergues, because you can sign up to volunteer at these albergues where people stay, but they were all full of volunteers. So he, for the last 2 or 3 years, he had spent all his vacation, 2 weeks every year. He comes over, buys a bunch of lemons, sets up a table. He had sugar, he had ice, and then he just makes lemonade for people. When you show up, he makes you a lemonade, and off you go. That's how he spends his vacation. Okay, and almost done. I just wanted to talk about acceptance, because I think this is one of the beautiful things of going on a journey like this, is people just accepted who you were. You know, they don't know who you are ahead of time, and so you sit down and talk with people, and you're accepted for who you are, how you present yourself. This was the last leg. In order to get your certificate, you have to go the last 100 kilometers, and you have to have, I think, at least 2 or 4 stamps or something. These 2 kids had about 20 adults with them, and the adults had blue and green balloons. And they had obviously gone the last 100 kilometers with these kids in their wheelchairs. And this was as they were coming into Santiago at the end. They were, you know, supported. Everybody was cheering them. It was very, very touching. This really should go back to the relationships. This was an elderly gentleman. I think he and his wife were in their 80s. We saw them at the beginning of the journey. They were doing the whole thing. They had just a golf cart with their backpack, and we asked them, gosh, how long? They said, well, we'll just keep going till we're done. And so they would go just a little bit every day. They might still be out there now. I don't know. But they were so sweet. I think they were from Germany. So I guess what I wanted to say, this is as you come in at the end to the Santiago, and what really hit me, I think especially afterwards, was this whole journey is like a metaphor for life. We start out, we're not sure what to expect. We have all these experiences. We have ups, we have downs, we have ways that we have to negotiate relationships. And then you finally get to the end, and you get your ceremony. We got our certificates, and you're done. You have to accept that this is it, that you've finished. But then what happens after that is you go home. You go back to where you started. And I really think that is a metaphor for life, because we all get born, we all go through this life. We get to the end, and you have to accept this is the end. And then at that point, you go home, wherever that may be. So I think I have one quote, because everybody ends with a quote, but this is, the guy who broke his fibula, Joe Lambert, gave me a Buddhist book. It's called Glimpse After Glimpse, and it's about the reflections on death and journey. So this is a quote. The teachings, that means teachings of whatever's, religion or anything, tell us what we need to realize. But we also have to go on our own journey in order to come to our personal realization. In the end, it's just about ourselves. That journey may take us through suffering, difficulties, and doubts of all kind, but they become our greatest teachers, and that's how it was on this journey. So that's the end of the talk. Now I would like to invite anybody else who's been, if they want to come up and say a few words, and if not, questions of any type. Let me turn on the light so we can see each other. Is anyone here thinking of going? Ah, good. Kathy, you've been. Do you want to say anything? Here. Yeah, come up here and I'll put this on your ear. Okay.
Well, like Sarah, I went on my journey with my sister, but we've been in a habit ever since from the whole time we were growing up, spending a lot of time backpacking, hiking together, and so we every year every couple of years try to do what we call 40 days in the wilderness, which has been mostly in the Sierra Nevada, doing like John Trail, things like that. So we thought, we're in really good shape. Doing the Camino is humbling. It really is. And like Sarah said, there's all kinds of phases. You come with certain expectations, and those are put by the wayside, and you just adapt as you go along. And even though we thought we were in good shape, we weren't as prepared as we thought we were. And we stayed in albergues, and so some days we were old, the older ones on all the, and the only Americans. We did the Camino Norte along the coast of Spain. And we got to some albergues, and they were full. And a lot of times it's the only albergue in the town. And so we had to keep going. And one day we had started at 5 in the morning, knowing it was a very small albergue. We got there early in the day, and it was already full. People lined up outside, and we had to keep going. That day started at 5 in the morning, and we finally got a place to stay at 11:45 at night. And it was arrived in the room, we finally found the bed, we finally got to a young couple from France who had a 2-year-old with them, a little, and they said, no, if you don't take it, it's for the next people that are signed up. And we said, well, what do we do? Breaks your heart. They said, that's okay, we'll try to find a train station and sleep on the deck. But the people there are amazing. They will go out of their way to help you find the way you're going, find a place to stay. We had people that actually, because we got there with no room to stay, opened their houses to it. So the Camino is a wonderful experience, and I'm really excited because my granddaughter, who's now 23 actually, called and said, Grandma, do the Camino with me next year. So we're going back next year with my granddaughter. So I'm just really excited about that, and then I'll be really old doing it. But you gotta do what you can do while you can do it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
People, can you stop on the side, say if you went 5 miles and you're can you
Yeah.
just stop on the side and camp overnight?
Yeah, you can't really camp. I mean, you have a tent, but no, you can stop anywhere. There's no given deadline.
Well, I mean, if you have a sleeping bag, you just go off the side of the
You
road.
probably could. I didn't see anybody.
Too many people,
Yeah.
too many on the Camino, so years and years ago, people were doing that, but so many people were doing it that it got to be.
Yeah, I think they have rules about it. I was just gonna pass around, the passport where you get stamped. I actually got into the second one. And then this book, John Brierly, who's done it many, many times, he has the book for every place. This was our Bible. We would get this, we each have a book. And one was just for the doctors, but anyway, that book is very helpful. It kind of gives you the route. And then the other thing, I was just going to say something about hiking poles, because I never used to hike with poles, but these take a lot of weight off your knees, and I really love these poles. By the end, they got stuck. Like I would have collapsed, and I had to get on the plane, and I had to go find a guy in the plaza by the cathedral, and he and I were both pulling, and we still couldn't get them apart. And finally, he did. His wife kind of joined in, and she was going. He was from Portugal, I think. Anyway, but they're good sturdy poles, and now I'm going to hike with them all the time because you kind of pull yourself up. Oops. Anyway, this one isn't that. So if you ever do anything like that, make sure you have a pole. And the other thing I just wanted to mention about people helping. We were at Salahun, which is halfway through, and you can get a halfway certificate. And we were walking back to our hotel, and this lady, there were lots of cherries. We used to eat a lot of cherries on this trip. Anyway, this lady was trimming her cherry tree, so she said, "Oh, make it." So, we went, and she just gave us each a branch up this big, full of cherries. Here, take these. Cut it off my tree. So we were walking through town with our cherry branches, and back to the hotel, and everybody was picking cherries off these branches. It was just one of those things that's just an example of like, okay, we'll take them, thank you. Those things happen every day.
Yeah. I think doing Camino is the greatest gift you can give yourself. It's nice to hike in the Sierras and all, but to go from place to place and meet all these people, and it's a spiritual journey. Even for people who don't go for spiritual reasons, their life will change. And just talking with Kathy, I was hiking along and got to an Alberta, it was full. Went to the next one, it was full. It was dark. All the way up to the next one, the guy says, "I'm full too." He said, "But where are you?" And I told him where I was. He said, "Well, I'm going to said, where are we going? He says, well, I got this hostel over there, but I had a castle on the coast that, 50 there, so up there, stone building, 1,000 years old or so, he renovated. He takes me around, he says, fridge is full, the wine cellar's down, here's the key. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going back, I gotta work on the LJ hostel. Just leave the key under the mat and we'll leave. It says, sometimes, be careful when you entertain strangers, for you entertain angels unaware. And those, I'm sure we all, walk the Camino, you need a continuous string of angels. Right, Sarah?
Yeah. There are cookies out in front, and there's tables in the patio. Anybody just wants to sit around and talk about your questions or your experiences are welcome to. Everybody's got things to do. But again, I appreciate your coming and listening. And if you want to see the other like 950 pictures,
Are you gonna do it again?
depends. My sister, I think this is being recorded, so I hope my sister's husband doesn't watch this eventually, but my sister Jane, who's always organized, she had clothesline and clothespins and everything you need. It was great. And Pam too. In that suitcase, I ended up putting my pillow in her suitcase every day. But Jane said, if I really make it and I don't have to stop, and I really make it, I think I might get a little tattoo with a scholarship shell on my right shoulder. Jane is not, she's not for tattoos, but I'm really curious to see if she's going to get a tattoo. But don't tell Stan, don't tell her. So we'll see.
Aaron, do you think Pam broke her finger?
Yeah, she has, I was going to put the MRI, but I didn't have it when Scott and I were putting together the slides. Yeah,
Was that from the beginning when she fell down those stairs?
No, she was fine, and then one day I think it just crunched. She did end up in Leon going to the Pilgrim's Clinic, so they have an urgent care there, and at 11, they have Pilgrim hours from 11 to 3. Anybody can walk in there totally free. She had a doctor visit. They didn't do an X-ray. No. They did an X-ray when she came. No, I can't remember. I don't think they did an X-ray there, but they gave her medication, and then they gave her a little paper about the visit to take to her doctor, and she was thrilled because it said, this 32-year-old woman has a problem with her left leg. Well, it wasn't her right leg. But other than that, she got that paper. She was quite proud of it. But then when she got home, she went and got an X-ray, and it showed a crack, and then she had an MRI, and it showed this fracture really across the whole top of the bone. She was walking, and she's tough. But anyway, so she's healing. We're all healing. And if you want to see my toenails, you can come look. Another one fell off last week. I just took off my sock, and I was like, what is that? Oh, that's a toe. So I think, did you lose any toenails, Kathy? No. Yes.
I know you're fluent in Spanish. If you're not, can you exist fairly well along there? And then, is the Spanish the same? Did you really could understand it at all?
Yeah, I could communicate, easily enough. I think enough people speak English. There were some of the smaller towns, though, that it really helped to speak Spanish. And when Pam was trying to negotiate getting on the bus to meet us, at the end of the day, she had a hard time because some of the people at the bus stations didn't speak English. But for the most part, you can get it. But I think it really helped. And I started to dream in Spanish. I was the same thing. I started to dream in Spanish. So. And we did stay. We were with the running of the bulls, not in Palm coffee. It was great, and her husband, they had sheep, they had a big farm in this picturesque mountains, it's like the Swiss Alps. And she was telling us that it had snowed, and so she showed a picture, and she spoke a little English, not too much Spanish, mostly Basque, that region, different, hard to understand. But anyway, she showed us the picture, and it was all these little white lumps in the field, and it was all the sheep, and they had 4 or 5 inches of snow. That's last week, you know. So the air really can, I mean, the weather can change, or now I think it's so hot, so hopefully, and no air conditioning. Very few places have air conditioning. It really is stifling sometimes.
What altitude do you go up to when you go to the pyramids?
I think it's in that orange book. I think it's 7,500, something like that. Yeah, you're not in the tallest part of it. You're at that far western edge. And it's beautiful. Yes.
I have some friends who are hiking there now with some physical difficulties. You said there are fires up in that region?
Well, are they on this is called the Camino Francés, so that's the, right up, yeah. I think the fires are more down low to the south, but, and that area, if it's not green, then it's all wheat fields and crops, so. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, well, please help yourselves to cookie. There's gaudy bags. Yes, hi, Lee.
Hi, if anybody's thinking about doing it, you don't really have to suffer as much as everyone. And she's inferred, because there are tours where you can walk 5 or 6 miles a day and sleep in a hotel and stuff like that. So if you really want to, you can still have the experience. And you don't really have to
You tell
suffer
my sister.
quite as much as they have.
How many miles did you walk today?
What's that?
How many miles did you guys walk today?
Well, it varied. A couple of days were 21, 22, some of them. The average for 3-4 days is 14 miles a day. And we didn't have breaks, which we should have, but we thought we had it. My sister thought she had to get back to work, but she didn't. But the break days are very helpful. I think if we had a couple breaks, everything would have been a little better. But the average is 14 if you do it in half days. If you don't have the set lodging like we did, then you can just go in caves. But the problem is that you get crowded and you might not have lodging. So we went from the end of May through, we got back June 24th, I think, or something like that. So the end of the really busy time starts in June.
Next stop, Mount Everest.
With that?
Next stop, Mount Everest.
But I will say, I'll just tell you really quick, if you really want to know or not. But I got a routine. Well, first of all, I had my own room. They had 2 in a room because my middle sister joined late. And so I was going to write a book on this trip about my pediatric life. And that lasted it didn't even start. I tried, I was so sleepy every night. I would write it, boom, out. I gave that up. That's one thing I gave up, writing a book. But, so my routine was, and so we decided, because everybody needed a break, that I would have my single room, which was a little more expensive, for 2 nights, and then they'd switch off and one of them would get it at 2 nights, and that worked really well. But my routine was get to the room, take off all your clothes, throw them in the bottom of the shower, take a shower, jump on the clothes, and put some soap on them, bring them out, and then hang them up all over the room, and then the next day they'd be dry, because you don't need that many clothes. Well, my sister's clothesline, they have a laundromat, they have all this nice, I'm probably exaggerating, but my routine was very
easy.
Yeah. And I would start off in different shoes. I had hiking boots, my good old hiking boots that I've always hiked in. I left those about 100 miles in, and I had my took was this lighter weight hiking boots, and I got the right socks. My friend Sid told me get the right socks. So I got the right socks. I have. These are special Camino socks. They happen to still be in my backpack. I know they didn't bring them on purpose, but I know.
What makes them special? Why?
They're padded. They don't slide around in your boot.
Uh-huh.
Is that right?
There's double layers,
Yeah,
a few layers.
yeah.
So how long would it take if you were to go at a leisurely pace, a reasonable pace, and take a few days breaks in
I
between?
think a couple of months probably. Yeah. Can you buy stuff like if you need a new pair of shoes or not socks? Everywhere. Yeah, they have a lot. So my sister, when her leg started hurting, she bought new shoes. I bought a pair of hiking sandals. Yeah, and they have everything you need. The most important thing is called Compeed. Compeed is this sticky little bandage gel that you can stick on your foot. Like if you start to, you should put it on the friction points before you get a blister, and it sticks. The problem is if you already have a blister and then you pull it off, everything's coming with it. So you gotta let it wear off. But they have, you walk into any store, and the Compeed stand is right there. So they sell a lot of it. And yeah, they're very equipped to take care of it. So this is how my shell looked at the end. And I'll probably still